All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Now, a lot of people dread this post-lunch, sleepy afternoon time slot. But I have a different perspective, okay? Did some research, and research shows that legal judges typically give easier sentences right after lunch. There's a highly quoted research paper published in Nast, the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, where they studied over 1,000 judicial rulings in Israel, and they found that legal judges were much less likely to grant parole and much more likely to give harsher sentences to prisoners when the hearing was right before lunch. But right after lunch, the hearings were a lot easier and they were more likely to grant parole. Likely this is because in the mornings, they were hungry, grumpy, not really feeling great, but right after lunch, their bellies were full and they were feeling more generous. So you might be wondering why I am telling you this now. 2 reasons. Number 1, if you were ever in prison, scheduling your parole hearing with your judge, I encourage you to schedule that right after lunch. Number 2, we are in the slot after lunch, early morning. So I would hope that you, just like the judges in this study, are feeling happy and full. And as a result, perhaps we will see that come out in the feedback scores. I'm Sarah. I am from the Professional Services Organization at Google. I am based in London, and I work with some of our biggest and most strategic customers on digital transformation. And I'm thrilled to see some familiar faces in the room today. And now, let's get to know ourselves in the room, okay? I would like you to turn to the person on your left. If you don't like what you see, turn to the person on your right. And I would like you to share with them your first name and your number 1 reason, your main reason for being at this presentation on Making Change Stick. Okay? Go ahead. Okay. Thank you so much. It's great to see you all here today. And I know we've got a diverse group. So some of you are here because your organizations are already on G Suite, and you might be wondering, how can I increase adoption? How can I make the tools more effective for my people? I know some of you are not yet Google customers and are considering whether G Suite might be the right tool for your organizations for digital workplace and collaboration. I can see some of our partners in the room who work very closely with us and our customers to bring G Suite to life. And a couple of you, and you know who you are here for the free food. Regardless of why you're here, regardless of the main reason you have shared with your partner on why you want to learn about making change stick, I think there's one thing that we can all agree on, one thing that everyone in the room has in common, and that is that change is hard. I think we can all agree that change is very difficult, especially in our organizations, in the workplace. And in fact, neuroscience tells us that as humans, naturally we resist change. However, when change is done right, when it is done in a structured way, it can be hugely powerful and transformational. And part of my job is to understand the psychology of change and what's happening in our brains. Because if we know that, then we can target our communications and change management programs to help people change their way of working and behavior towards that digital or cloud goal. So on that, today I will share 7 tips with you to help manage change in your organizations and increase G Suite adoption or go throughout your G Suite deployments. And ultimately, how to make change stick in your teams and organizations. Then I am very happy that we will have 3 of our special guests join us. We have 2 customers and 1 partner that will come on stage and share their stories of making change stick. How does that sound? Okay, fantastic. So, question for the group. Has anyone seen this movie? Couple hands. What's this movie? Call it out. The Internship, exactly. So in this movie, Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson are recently laid off salesmen, having trouble in the industry, trying to find another job. And so they end up competing to get a summer internship role at Google with a much younger crowd. So when this movie came out in 2013, it was very topical at Google because some of the concepts that were in the movie are actual concepts that we use at Google and we used back then. But some of the things that were brought into the movie are completely new. And Vince Vaughn actually came up with a lot of these concepts as one of the producers of the film. And so in this GIF here, Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn are in Noogler orientation. So this is a true thing. It's for new Googlers or Nooglers. And they're using this simple concept of voting yes or no and giving feedback. And when this came out, this concept was not previously used at Google, but Googlers gleefully incorporated this simple way of voting yes or no at company meetings. And so as time moved on, and to make things more scalable and easier to use, this concept morphed into, you may have guessed it, a digital app. This app is called Dory. Has anyone used Dory before at other Google conferences? A couple of you? So Dory is this app where you can vote yes, you can vote no, you can comment on things, you can ask questions. So it's a little more advanced than the paddles that we have today, but it's a similar concept. So thank you, Vince Vaughn. So we're going to use the paddles today. We're going to go back in time. You each have 2 paddles, a red and a green. I am going to display a statement on the screen. It's going to be a tip or tactic related to change management. If you think that that statement is true, I want you to put up your green paddle, okay? If you think that statement is not true, put up your red paddle. Green for yes, red for no. Make sense, everyone? Pretty simple? Okay, so let's start with a test round. Are you all ready to go? Okay, so we are currently in London. Very good. Round of applause. Some very smart people in the room here. Thank you so much. Absolutely, you've got it. Okay, let's start with the real one. Yes. Communications and training are the most important factors in successful change initiatives. What do you think? I'm seeing a lot of greens. In fact, almost unanimously green. No, we do have some reds. All right, so it is true, yes, that communications and training are absolutely critical. However, the answer is no. Has anyone heard of Prozi? So for the change managers in the room, people with change management and training backgrounds, Prozi is an international change management research and consulting organization. They're well-renowned and they're quoted in many change management papers and sources. And every 2 years, they do a study. And the purpose is to find out what can we do to make change management initiatives successful. For the past 2 decades, a lot has changed in our lives. But one thing has remained the same in this study every 2 years. And that is that the most important, the top contributor to successful change initiatives, honestly, regardless of what you're trying to change, is that you have active and visible executive sponsorship. So what do I mean by that? That means the CEO, the COO, the CIO, other senior leaders actively and visibly promoting the change, using G Suite themselves, talking about the benefits of G Suite, walking the talk and leading by example. That is the most influential factor. And so if you want your change initiatives to be successful, communications and training are also key, but the one most important thing you can do to change people's behavior is to have that active and visible executive sponsorship. Okay. Including people in the change will help with G Suite adoption? What do you think? About 98% green. Well done. Absolutely, the answer is yes. In fact, neuroscience tells us that when we experience the feeling of being excluded from something, it triggers the same part of our brain that deals with physical pain. So if there's any neuroscientists in the room, that part of the brain is the anterior cingulate, the dorsal portion. And that exclusion is quite painful for us. And the way this was discovered was really quite interesting. There's a psychologist and professor named Dr. Naomi Eisenberger at the University of CLA. And she was analyzing brain scans of people that went through social rejection, social pain, exclusion from a particular activity. By fluke, she was in the office looking at these brain scans on her computer, and one of her colleagues was sitting next to her. And her colleague was studying brain scans, fMRI scans, of someone that went through physical pain, like chronic illness, chronic bowel syndrome. The two brain scans looked very similar. And in many cases, they couldn't actually tell the differences between the two brain scans. So this kicked off many more research and study in the lab to prove that yes, in fact, our brains respond the same way to social exclusion pain as our brains respond to physical pain. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Well, we know that being excluded is so painful for people. If people aren't included in what's going on, if they don't know why the change is happening or what the next steps are, it's very hard for them to adapt. I don't know about you, but most people don't like to be told what to do. They like to be involved in that process. They feel like an owner of it when they're involved. And so how can you involve people in the change? Well, many of your organizations have brought in the concept of Google Guides. So Google Guides is where we encourage organizations to take about 10% of the employees, introduce them to G Suite early, make them feel special, involve them in the program, ask key program updates, include them, and use them as the change network to scale the change. There's other ways you can involve people in the change. I used to work with one organization that had offices across Central Eastern Europe. And at this organization, they had Google Guides at all different levels. They also had each of the country leaders become an executive sponsor and also be a Google Guide. So involving people in the change as much as you can, engaging them will help you get a whole lot further. I don't know if any of you saw the keynote this morning when we had FCA, CIO up on stage. So I've worked closely with FCA, and they did a really great job of involving Google Guides throughout the program, but also involving champions after the program in an innovation council. And so Google will release, and you've probably experienced this, new updates on G Suite monthly. And so having this group engaged, being able to involve them in the change and share those updates moving forward will help you get a whole lot further. And I know that a lot of you are doing this already. Okay, you ready for the next one? Yeah? Solving problems for people is the most effective use of your time. Yes or no? Pretty much no's across the board, a couple of greens. All right, so the answer here is actually no. Letting people solve their own problems is much more effective. When we solve our own problems, we get a rush of adrenaline. It's a positive or natural high. Are there any adrenaline junkies in the room? Yes, seeing a couple greens. Okay, I definitely am a junkie. Whether you're a junkie or not, an adrenaline junkie, just let me clarify with you. We all know this feeling, right? When you get that rush of adrenaline, when you do that presentation at work, when you win a big deal, it's this positive, natural high that we're all familiar with. Now, there's a recent Harvard Business Review that came out a couple years ago by 3 professors, and it's called the IKEA effect. And the concept is that when people build something themselves, like an IKEA bed or an IKEA cabinet, they perceive that thing with a higher and increased value than if they hadn't made it themselves. And so when we construct our own IKEA beds, if you can get through it without getting into a fight with your husband or wife, then we feel this sense of adrenaline and accomplishment. And so to make your G Suite program and change program successful, you can facilitate this feeling of adrenaline, help people solve their own problems, let them discover the solutions themselves. And so at Google, we do transformation labs. A lot of our partners and customers are probably familiar with these as well. So in these transformation labs, we take a full day workshop, we follow design thinking principles and work with a small sample of a team. Let's say we're working with the HR team. So you take these people in a room and get them to think big. What are all the different ways that you can reinvent your current business processes with a new technology? Whole big thinking, then you start coming up with ideating these different ideas, prioritizing them, figuring out which ones are easy to implement, highest impact, and then get these people to start thinking about how they would implement these solutions. All of a sudden, there's a group of people that have solved their own problem. They called out the problem and came up with solutions. And you get to build this sense of ownership that helps with the implementation going forward. So if you can set up the conditions for people to solve their own problems, like through workshops, or if your manager's in the room coaching people versus telling them, then that is much more effective. People own what they create, right? So try to set up that environment where they can solve that problem and own the solution going forward. All right, next one. Communicate, communicate, and communicate again. What do you think? Greens. Some strong greens, couple reds in the room, so the answer is absolutely yes. There is no such thing as over-communication. Have you ever heard of the marketing rule of sevens? Anyone? Yes? Several of you have. So this is the concept that people need to hear something 7 times before they actually remember it. People need to hear something 7 times before they actually remember it. People need, should I keep going? You get the concept. So when you announce a change, when you're asking people to work differently, to change their behavior, you need to communicate this 7 times. And you also need to communicate it in different ways. There's auditory learners, experiential learners, visual learners, a whole bunch of different channels and mediums that you can communicate. And especially in today's day and age, when we're bombarded with information around the world, I would even argue that you need to communicate the same message more than 7 times, so it really does stick with people. And for those of you involved in the tight program team of rolling out a change, it might feel like overkill, but for everyone else in the organization, moving G Suite or whatever the technology implementation is, it's a very small part of their agenda. Make sense? You all agreed with that one, so we're clear on that. All right, typically, when you go through a change, you will see 2 types of groups: the change critics and the change navigators. What do you think? I'm seeing some reds. Definitely a mix in the group. So the answer is actually no. When you go through a change at an organization, there are hundreds of different reactions that you will see. Change is a very human and reactional response, and so people will have a whole wide range of responses. However, typically what happens, and what research tells us, is that you will see 4 different reactions to change. So the first is absolutely the change critics. These are the people that openly and verbally resist the change. Secondly, you do have the change navigators. These are the really forward-thinking, enthusiastic people. They want to be involved in the project. They want to work with new technology. Sure, you've probably come across both of these reactions or personas of people. Now, the third main priority group is the bystanders. These people ignore the change. Yeah, I heard about that, but I don't really think it's going to happen. It's not going to affect me. I've seen changes announced before, but it doesn't really come into place. They just ignore it completely. And the fourth main reaction to change is the change victims. These are the people who take organizational change very personally. Oh, why me? Another change. I just learned this technology and this tool. I have to learn another one. So those are the 4 typical reactions that you see to change. And normally we will see an equal spread throughout. So 1 quarter, 1 quarter, 1 quarter, and 1 quarter. And as you're thinking about bringing a new change to your organizations and having people adapt to this new change, you have to consider those 4 different reactions. And the way you communicate with these people, the way you engage with them, are very different at different levels. Question for the group, who do you want most on your team out of those 4 typical personas? Call it out. Navigator? Yes, definitely. You want those gung-ho, excited people, those navigators on your team. Now, a bit of a harder question. What is the second most promising group that you want on your team? Call it out. Critics, absolutely. Now, the critics vocally obstruct and object to the change. If you can get those people on board, spend a little more time with them, figure out why they're against the change, and help bring them along the journey, that's extremely powerful to others in the team and the organization. Okay. Using a structured approach to change management will help with G Suite adoption. Yes, yes. Most of the group is saying yes. Absolutely, using a structured approach to change management will help in all of your change programs. At Google, the structure has 4 different pillars. And these pillars are all based on neuroscience, the psychology of change, and the experience that we've had working with our customers. So the first pillar of the structure is sponsorship and engagement. And so that's bringing in those executive sponsors, making sure those key leaders are engaged, involving people like the Google Guides in the program. Sponsorship and engagement is one. The second is organizational analysis. And this is where you take a look at your organization. You think about all the different users that there are in the group. Executive assistants, marketing managers, HR professionals, operations, finance, executives, they all work in very different ways just by the nature of their job. And so this process is thinking about who are the different personas in the group, how do they work, what are they motivated by, and knowing that, you can target communications, engagement, and training plans that will be relevant for each of those different user groups. The 4th pillar of the structured change management approach, the 3rd is communications, and finally is training, which is pretty, self-explanatory. So those are the 4 main pillars. A lot of our partners and customers use slightly different approaches, but thinking about those elements and having a structure in place is very important to help with your G Suite adoption. Now, all of this structure is posted online on Google Cloud Connect, a site that we have for our partners and our customers. There are templates and tools on there, examples of success metrics, and how you might track this structured program going forward. Has anyone used that site, Google Cloud Connect? Couple of hands? Fabulous. All right, next question. Making the project fun is a waste of time. Oh, I love the amount of no's in the room. Absolutely, it is not a waste of time. It's absolutely worth it to make the project fun. Now, why is that? Neuroscience tells us that the greater amount of attention density that we pay to something, the easier it is for us to remember and for us to adapt our behavior. It's quite simple. If we find something interesting, if it catches our attention, we're much more likely to know what people are talking about and follow through to change their behavior. If it's boring, if it doesn't catch your attention, you're going to ignore it and not change your behavior. So spend the time, get some budget together, make the projects fun and exciting. I've worked with a lot of customers that have done great examples of this. FCA was just up on stage earlier. They created all these songs around G Suite and Romeo and Juliet, a quick play on words. They had a big truck set up where people could walk into the truck with a bunch of laptops and tools set up and play around with the tools. There's a lot of great ways to make the engagement quite fun. One of our other customers has done these escape rooms, so setting up an environment where people can learn and try out the tools on their own. There's a lot of great ways that you can do it, and it is worth spending the time to think of that fun. And if you ever want some ideas, you're welcome to talk to me. All right, so that wraps up our quiz for the day. In summary, today's top tips for making change stick are: 1, ensure that you have active and visible executive sponsorship. 2, involve people in the change. 3, empower people to solve their own problems. Use a variety of communication channels and communicate, and communicate again, plus 4 more times. Recognize the different faces of change, those critics, navigators, bystanders, and victims, and use a structured approach to change management. And finally, last but not least, make the project fun. Now, with that, I would like to invite up our 3 esteemed guests, our change sticklers, who are going to share their experiences of these change management tips and tactics in real life environments from their unique perspectives. Come on up. Can I get a round of applause, please? Okay, thank you so much for joining. So why don't we start with letting the crowd get to know you a little bit. Jackie, would you start just introduce yourself, share your name, your role, and a little bit about your organization, please.
Yeah, sure. So I go by Jack. I am Australian, so don't mind my accent if you can't understand anything I'm saying. But my name's Jacqueline Camus. I work for Conde Nast as the change manager for the G Suite deployment across our international markets. Basically, Conde Nast is a global media company. We have a lot of iconic brands such as Vogue, GQ, and Glamour. But overall, we have 31 markets worldwide, and we're headquartered in London and New York.
Thank you. Philippe.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Philippe Benoit, so I'm a Satawat project director. I work for Veolia, so Veolia is a worldwide company. We are about 170,000 people around the world in more than 50 countries. We are all resourcers within Veolia through 3 main activities, which are water treatment, waste management, and energy management. And our headquarters is in France, but as I told you, we are present in all the zones all around the world.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Patricio from Revevol Group. So with my team of change management specialists based in Europe and US, we basically help companies lead their transformation journey. And we operate locally because we know that change is local. We operate locally through our apps trainer network, which is a network of 40-ish trainers operating in 80 countries and 35 languages, which help very much the change.
Fabulous, thank you so much. And next on to a very important and practical question. If you were to be a G Suite application, which app would you be? Start with Jackie.
Okay, so I was tossing up between a Google Form and a Google Doc. One, I like the Google Form because you can collect information. But I think I decided to go with being a Google Doc. So voice typing is one of the best features I find in Google Docs. So I like it that you can have multiple languages, so it really resonates with me.
All right. Felipe, how about you?
It's the same question? Yeah. So I would be Hangout Meet because for me it's really powerful. You can see all your colleagues all around the world, work with them, speak with them, and it's really easy. Just push the button and they are in front of you.
Awesome.
I assume all of them is not an answer. So I will have to choose between Sheets and Slides. Probably I will use Sheets, sorry. And mainly because of this recent new feature, which is the show edit history of a cell, which is really tremendous. Yeah, I can see some of you nodding, like this one.
Awesome, thank you. So we've just shared 7 tips earlier, and now we'll hear different perspectives from our customers and our partners on what this is like in action. Jackie, I'd like to pass it off on to you.
Yeah, sure. So the tip that really resonated with me is using a structured approach to manage change. And realistically, what I wanted to talk about there is how Conde Nast went through the journey of deploying G Suite to really help accelerate adoption, but just make sure our user journey was still focused on our end users as a cultural transformation versus technology really driving that change. So overall, Conde Nast is really focused on creating dynamic content, and they have a very strong drive towards innovation of that dynamic content as well. So our focus is really about our audience and our customers. So when we were deploying G Suite, it was almost the challenge in itself that how do we actually resonate the story of the G Suite applications to this user base where it's not the forefront of the organization, it's not, as you can say, the moneymaker. So from that perspective, we had multiple geographies as well. We were looking at 8 different countries, probably across 20 different office locations as well as probably 9 languages we had to roll out G Suite across. So then again, our scale and our remit was also being quite challenged as well because we had a finite amount of resources, probably a small project team, you could say. There's only 4 of us. But overall, what I think the journey for Conde Nast was really about was 3 core aspects. We've touched on some of them as well throughout today's session, but the 3 core aspects that I wanted to call out was 1, project phases. Incredibly important when working on a change management scheme. So really understanding the delivery, the design, and then, the discovery, the design, and then the delivery aspects of that change journey. The second aspect is scalability. So I'll talk a little bit about referencing our partner network. And then finally, empowering a global change network. So not just the change champions that you normally see, but really change advocates, so a point of contact within the organization that can really help you understand the user sentiment and see what the journey is like for colleagues across those international markets. So firstly, if I focus on the project side of things, we really did it in 3 phases. The first phase is that we thought, okay, we'll take a bit of a roller coaster ride and we'll look at the UK and we'll roll out the UK market. So the UK market's about 1,000 employees, and we wanted to learn what workflows we would come across, what challenges, what user groups, as we were talking about earlier, those user segmentations, how they would use the tools, and what impact that would have on the business. So we took those learnings from the UK rollout, and then we quickly, sort of over the Christmas break, decided to reinvent the wheel and put a very streamlined and structured approach to our next markets that we would tackle. So what that really allowed us to do was take those lessons learned and reinforce any of those resistant user groups or powerful user groups as well. And we really took those people on a journey in the next phase, which was quite quick. And it allowed us to deploy the rest of our international markets like India, Japan, Mexico, over an 8-week period. So it was very, very quick once we did that first sort of step and hurdle. I think the other aspect of that is that we had a really good and powerful team. We were very close-knit. We were always communicating and collaborating as much as possible. And I think that's really important about having that strong relationship and connection with your coworkers in order to build those diverse ideas and make sure that those diverse ideas are seen within your peers across the organization. The second aspect, I guess, after the UK rollout is scalability. So with this point in terms of using a structured change management approach, it's really leveraging your partner network. So a huge shout out to our partner Chorus, who really helped tailor our journey for us. Obviously, learning all of those plans and initiatives and challenges that they have faced across other organizations is very key and powerful, because you can take those learnings and adapt them to what's relevant for your organization as well. So obviously Conde Nast is a media company, and Chorus had a lot of support and framework around how to work with a media organization, a media industry, and how to really resonate that story once again when technology was not the forefront of the idea. The other aspect as well is leveraging their expertise and their knowledge. Of course, they're very technically savvy, but the change management aspect of that, I remember sitting in a boardroom for a couple weeks on end working with my counterpart at Chorus, and really just brainstorming logistically how we would manage the scale of what we were deploying. And that goes from pure basics like room logistics, language requirements, time zones. You know, those simple things that you actually forget about are so relevant to your organization. So having that mindfulness around what is important to your colleagues and your peers when you're doing a global program like this, I found super successful and very, very important. That is also to say we used Revevol, funnily enough, and we used them as our training partner and network because in our scalable program, we also had to think about how we were going to leverage these multiple geographies and educate staff members, educate them on their new workflows. And that's incredibly important to have a partner like that who has that geographical scale because we were finite at our headquarters in London. So a shout out to both of the teams, and I truly believe that it's a great team effort when doing a deployment like this.
Fabulous, thank you. Oh, sorry.
The last thing was the change network, I think. And it was just really fun and an enjoyable way to manage the change management program for Conde Nast. We had a volunteer internally across all of the global markets. And from that perspective, you could really see that it wasn't a technology shift. It was an individual outside of IT who was leveraging the power and the sentiment and the fun activities within the organization versus as an IT-driven initiative. So from that perspective, it was really successful. As I said, deployed over internationally across 8 weeks. And from looking backwards, it's really made us a truly global organization and leverage the power of collaboration as well. So we're only on the cusp of the journey, but I think there's a lot more to come.
Fabulous, thank you very much, Jackie. Round of applause. It's really interesting to hear your perspective, and I love the iterative approach you took to learn how it's going and adjust it along the way. Thank you. With that, Philippe, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so here I want to insist on how executive sponsorship and manager are key in your change management project. So let's go back to our change management project in a few words so you better understand the context. Satawad. Satawad, it's a mysterious name for a project, isn't it? And yet, in one word, it describes the ambition we have behind this project. Secure at any time, from anywhere, from any device. This digital workplace project relies on 3 key principles. First one is the adoption of a global collaborative platform within Veolia by all the employees, so about 130,000 connected employees around the world. Second principle is a transformation to web format to decorate all the transformation of the application to web format to decorate them from the access device and provide the user the same experience as they have in their personal life. When you connect to your bank account, you access your photo, you don't care where you are, what time it is, which device you use. So we want the same experience for your user through this principle. And the third principle is the adoption of Chromebook, because today we consider that it's on the market the most secure and most performant device to access a web-based information system. Satawad raised a lot of IT challenges, as you probably imagine, as for instance, deploying at scale the same level of technology, the same level of security within a decentralized organization, and that's a big challenge. But despite that, Satawad is first of all a change management, an enterprise project. It's all about adoption, it's all about change, it's all about cultural change. It introduced transparency, new method of work, and also a new mindset within the organization, and it fully contributes to the digital transformation of the group on the employee pillar. In 2017, when we launched the project, we did a lot of things that are usual in a project startup, but one of the first things we did is to identify an executive sponsor. Why? To strengthen the position of the project as an enterprise transformation project, and not as an IT-only project, just focusing on deploying new tools, new devices, and so on. And that's really important. The role of the executive sponsor is key. It chairs the steering committee and raises all the progress or the challenges of the project at the executive committee level. So it means that you have high visibility at the highest level. He advises, the executive sponsor advice on the deployment strategy, advice on the next steps. In case of issue, he has a direct access to the other executive managers. So you can solve really easily your challenge, your issue, and find a positive solution for that. And last but not least, he communicates a lot on the project and participate to all the key SATAWAD events as an executive reference. So your executive sponsor, in your change management project, promotes your project and position this project at a good level within your organization.
Great.
There is another, that's the key to success for me, to have an executive sponsor for your change management project. But there is, for me, it's not sufficient. You need also to onboard all your managers. Because as we said, managers are human. Human sometimes doesn't like the change. And so you need to support them in this adventure, to help them break their fears by explaining your change management project, explain what will be the positive impact of your project. You must also provide them all the arguments, the storytelling they can use to convince their team to go to your target. And last but not least, most of the time, they become more than managers when you do some huge projects. They become real coaches for their teammates. And that's really key to explain them what the difference is and that this is a positive difference. If you don't, some of them will totally block the deployment of your projects because they will be out of their comfort zone, and they will block the deployment of their team. And it will be a nightmare to find a positive issue on that. It will be a good opportunity to raise the escalation to your executive sponsor because it will be really difficult, but you will lose a lot of time. If you onboard all your managers, they will be your best partner in this change management project. And you will save a lot of time because they will do the job on their own team. Yeah. So as a summary, my final advice is take as much time as required at the startup of your project to, 1, identify your executive sponsor, 2, onboard all your managers. It will take a lot of time. You will spend a lot of energy, but you won't lose your time. You will save a lot of time in the deployment phase of your project.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much on executive sponsorship. Round of applause. Thank you. And finally, Patricio, we'd love to hear from
Thank you. So today I'll try to demonstrate to you why it's really critical, why it's important to involve people in the change, and also share with you some tips on how you can do that. So you have understood that at Revevol we have a track record since 2007 of helping companies going to the cloud. And one thing that we are totally convinced is that a change comes from the inside. Basically, the change, whatever you do, it will be left in the end of the employee that one day will decide to change or not. So what is really key here is, of course, you will use external artifacts, buzz, sponsorship, communication, training, and etc. Everything, yes, you should do that. But keep in mind that in the end, it will be because you involve people in their own change that they will start changing. So if you take, for example, the example of sharing and co-edition, you agree with me, it's not really a natural behavior. What do you mean? You want me to share with you a document that is still not finished, still in draft mode. You will see my mistakes and etc. You're crazy. I prefer to do my document alone and then send it to you by mail, then you will review, etc. Those kind of things are not natural because it's new. So one thing that is really super important is to make sure that people can experiment this change. So experiment the change in order that they really see the value. And how do we do that? So I consider us as a change agent, and when I say us, I include you in this change team. We are change agents. We are here to help people change. So we should create a context, create a good mood in order that people are changing. And we are the trigger. We help them change. And so one of the things that we are convinced also is that it's easier to do it with fun, with playing. So it's a bit a mix of all what Sarah said and also Philippe and Jacqueline. So we love playing. At Revevol, we love playing. We are game player, and usually you will see that your colleagues also, they love playing. And if you can mix your colleagues playing and make this play useful for their job, then I would say half of the job is done. Keep in mind that the rest of the job must be done by the user themselves. So back a few years ago, we had such a question from one of our customers who was trying to take Office out of the different computers, going to Chromebooks, and they asked us what could we do in order to have a kind of intensive week of training, coaching, and etc. to make sure that people are really making the change in order to remove Office. And so that's what we created a package. It's an all-inclusive offer, basically. It's called the Google Week, and it's a week of intensive training, and it's backed with a transformation contest, a bit like the Festival de Cannes, you know, Festival de Cannes, where you can try to win an award, and then there is some prize at the end. So depending on our customer, the prize where it could be like champagne, or it could be Jabra speaker, it could be also KitchenAid robots, and etc. And the idea here is to make sure that you onboard the manager, back to Philippe's recommendation, and you make sure that managers understand that they will have to attend to play these contests with their team in order to win something. So there were different games to be played, transformation award about the best ideas that people could have to change the way they work, but there were also awards related to how people were changing their day-to-day work, so like meeting more efficient, better management of their document on a daily basis, and etc. And at the end of the week, because we helped them throughout a lot of short sessions, like 30, 60 minute coaching sessions, but also transformation lab, inspiration ideas, and etc. And it helped them, I mean the manager, it helped them start solving new problems by using better G Suite. In the end, there were also a system of points and clues and treasure hunt, and we have also added the escape game concept. So as a team, you were able to try to escape room by solving issues like you can hide a clue inside the history of a revision of a document. That works well. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so key success factors to make to involve people in their change is really to onboard the manager, brief them about the fact that something is changing, and it's up to them to decide to participate in this change. If they don't decide to participate, they will lose the contest, and also they will be seen as not participating to this transformation. Second one is to create this competition spirit, a gentle competition spirit between them, and in the end, coaching people with short sessions. It's the end of long session. It's short session, 30, 60 minutes. It works well. And make them play, and it will work normally.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Patricio. I love the concept of involving people, making fun, and using gamification tied to the actual behavior change in each person's role. Thank you very much. There are 3 different perspectives. Now, today we touched on some different tips for tactics and change management. We heard of our different perspectives, keeping in mind there's different organizational cultures and ways of working, but if you follow that structured approach, you're setting yourself up for success. In wrapping up, our partners and our customers work very closely together. And to leave you today, I'd just like to leave this quote from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. You may have heard this quote before. I recently learned that this is a famously misquoted quote from Charles Darwin. He never actually said this. It's been morphed and changed over the years, which I think sums up our presentation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.